So today on Scares and Sparks, I'm going to show you the world's first, drum roll please, pop-up spring-loaded prop that doesn't suck. Blew her head off. This is part 2 of the video where we're going to talk about how to actually make the prop mechanism from scratch. So the first thing we're going to do is put our frame together. Now I think I realised that not everybody's going to have the exact same pieces of hardwood laying around that I had, so instead decided I would go for something easy off the shelf. So PVC pipes. We've got 3/4 inch ones for the frame and a 1/2 inch one going up the center of the thing. Some 3D printers pieces to hold them. So this is the base one. So the pipes, 4 pipes going there. The middle one will slide. Couple of 4 mounting holes there. Notice I've cut it off here. This is so that we can get close up to it with a pulley. The other end of the thing, basically the same design with a cap. Also has a couple of screws positions. This is for actually hooking on the springs later on. So first thing to do, I'm going to put all of these pipes in and make a nice solid push down, and there are screws at the sides for us to screw them in as well. Right now I'm not going to do that, just going to get them in, everything off. Oh. So all 4 are in there. Then the other end, basically got to get them into the top section. So just flip it over, align them with the holes. You have to align all 4, push down hard. Ugh. I'm right in my camera here, so because the thing is now big. Now these are 2 foot. You can make this any sort of length you want really. Figure 2 foot was a good place to start. And then just to give you an idea of the sliding ability, the 1/2 inch pipe slides very smoothly. I mean, by doing it this way, it's hardly touching any of the bits. So there's a bit of play, a little bit of rattling, but it's going to be very easy for our spring mechanism to throw that in the air. I'm going to pull that out now, push down on these and make sure they're all good and firm and square. Now we're going to put some screws in the side as well as hanging a spring. For that we need to work out how much we want to extend this thing. So screws in the side. You could go all the way through if you wanted to, so you could use long screws, kind of like this. That would get through that one, through that pipe, all the way through. You could use long bolts if you've got some long bolts, drill through all the way through, and then mount them that way. Or you could use shorter screws each side, one there, one there, into these holes. So I'm going to use some shorter screws, so I'm going to pre-drill the holes and all the pipes, then I'm going to put the screws in, and then after that I'm going to hang some screws here with some washers on this end so that I can actually get my spring to hook on. Now this is an original version. I'm going to make it so we could use 2 springs. These are longer springs than I made on my first one, and they're pretty tough to pull. So 1 will probably be sufficient. We will see. I'm going to do that and then show you what I got to. Okay, so with the spring in place, got my 1/2 inch pipe sliding in. Now you're going to be at this end of the thing, you're going to be hitting the end stop. We want to put a switch or something part way up to stop you from actually going through there. So I'm up about 1 inch, give or take. This end we only have maybe a couple of inches hanging out, which may be insufficient, so it might be better to use a longer pipe for this Depends what you're going to hook up to it. Obviously you could put an adapter on the end, you could lengthen it. It'd be pretty easy to do once you're going. Next thing I need to do is put a hole where we think, you know, maximum strength or pull would be. I mean, I can pull this all the way over to there, and that's a lot of force I'm using. So I'm going to try somewhere around where this letter I is, for example. So I'm basically just going to put a marker hole. Then I'm going to take the thing out, find my hole here, go in with a small drill bit. Then I want to go all the way through there to the other side. Now you could of course just go one. I'm going to look down the end of the pipe and see if I can actually get, you know, the thing square. And if you've got access to a pillar drill or something like that, that's going to be really nice. You can just pull the handle down, go straight through nice and square. Now I've got it that size, going to enlarge the hole and put the metal bar through. So looking at my bolt here, measuring with my calipers, got a 4.8mm, so it's probably an M5 bolt. Here's an M5 drill. Just going to quickly open this up. Not sure what the imperial is for that. I think it's 0.2 of an inch, something like that. Going to go through both of them. Check my bolt goes through, which it does. And then I've got a couple of little spacers here, which enable me to kind of make sure the thing isn't going to bind. That's what I used on the previous design. This one has a much narrower distance between them than my wood, so I can't use them on this one. So what I'm going to do is slide my pipe in, put the bolt through. As you can see, it's come through to the other side, and for now I'm just going to loosely put the nut on, just a couple of threads. I am going to need to make some thinner spacers to really spread this out, but what you can see there, we've already made the basic spring mechanism that's required for the pop-up. And if all you wanted to do was, you know, make a basic spring pop-up, you could arrange a latch, use a door latch or something like that at this end with a string release. Would allow you to manually pop this thing up, and you've basically already completed your pop-up unit. You could put something on the top, put something on the here, as I say, as a latch, and you've got a manual prop. But of course, Scares and Sparks has got sparks in it, so we're not going to be content with that. We're going to make this into an automatic pop-up. Okay, so didn't really like the short pole, so I cut another one. This is a foot longer, about 3 feet. It's also not very straight. You can probably see even there if I rotate it, it's kind of wibbly wobbly. I also made the hole a little bit deeper so the spring will stretch more. It still slides okay. I mean, that's still sliding really okay. I also 3D printed a couple of spacers. These are just for the bolt that I've got. Pretty thin, but they've got no forces on them to speak. So I'm just going to put this one quickly together, and then we can move on to the next phase. So basically putting spacer and the bolt through. And the spacer is stopping that spring from going too far. Then the other side, put another spacer on, another big washer. Oh, the washer doesn't do anything this side. And a little nylon nut which I found, which fits. Now if I'm putting a spring both sides, then that's where I'm going to use my washer, and that's going to go under the spring head. But as I said, for now we're just going to have a single spring, just to see how much we can get it to do. And excuse me as I get in the frame, just as I tension the nut. So now we've got, you know, quite an appreciable amount of force to get that down the bottom. And if we want more, we can always put the hole further down. You know, the further we get this thing along, the more we're going to be able to tension this thing. So the next phase is to build the actual ratchet mechanism. So you're going to need a set of 3D printed parts for this one. There's the main piece that holds the servo. On the back you can see it's got some strengthening pieces, much stiffer than the original I made. This will also have a bearing in. My original one didn't use a bearing, just used a bolt to simply spin across. This one's going to have a little bearing which we're going to push in there. Will give a much cleaner motion. There we go, and it literally just clicks in place. So that's an M4 bearing in the centre. Can't remember what the outside is, 8 I think. I'll provide links to all these parts down below, including the STL files and the programming, etc. I'm not trying to lock any of this up behind a Patreon like wicked makers do. We'll just give the whole lot away because it's just about having fun and learning as we go. What else do we need? The other part we need is effectively the pulley support, the other side. Again, this one's got the other bearing in. It's going to go and fit in there. Looks like I need to do a little bit of work with a knife first to make that fit. You've also got the pulley and also the cog. Now I've got a little method here where I use 3 little pips on there. They just slides in. And that's actually pretty strong. That's proven pretty strong. If you really were worried, you could put a little bit of glue on there, but I've never done that. For the release servo mechanism, the one that makes it go ping, you're going to need a little servo bracket. Then you're going to need the 2 other pieces active. You're going to need the ratchet lever and also the pawl as well. Now all the bolts I'm using are either metric M4 or M3. I've got these multi-pack sets. Get them in Amazon. This IXL brand is pretty popular. You can see they come in all different lengths. They come with nuts, but I've also got some separate, nylock nuts as well, where we don't want things to move and change. So the first stage really is to get this other bearing into here, and then we're going to start putting together the pieces on the various arms. Now some of them after 3D printing might be a little bit tight. For example, this is supposed to be an M4 hole. You can see I can't quite get an M4 bolt through it, so I'm going to run a drill bit through that. Some of these smaller holes are 2.5 millimeters, and 2.5 is a good figure because you can actually then use an M3 bolt and it will self-tap and give you a really quite strong thread position. So I want to make sure they're all 2.5, so I'm going to go away with my drill bits and make these holes exactly how they all need to be, and put the bearing in, and then we can look at the assembly. Okay, so I've got a few more bits together now. Put my bearing in, pretty easy. Actually just used a bench vise, just pushed the thing in, and got some bits of hardware together. So the main shaft that's going to run through the thing is a 45mm long M4 bolt. So it's going to go through the back bit, not bothering with a washer. Then a couple of washers on there just to space it away from the bearings. Going to put in the pulley onto the ratchet. Now you've got to make sure your ratchet's going the right way. So just looking behind me at the other one, I've got that the wrong way around. So should look like that. Gonna just thread that on. Should run nice and smoothly, not binding. Then we're going to put another washer on just to separate this end with the other bearing support plate. So you end up, and it should look kind of like that. Nylock nut on the end because you don't want this thing to come undone. Which of course I will have to tighten up soon. It's just hand tight for now. So that's our basic supported 2-position ratchet and pulley. It's pretty strong with 2 bearings on the end of it. What else do we need? We need the release lever. This is the one that basically keeps the ratchet from moving unless it's moved. So here I've got a bolt. This is another M4. I make that 20mm, and I am going to make sure I've got a washer, actually a washer first, because we want to make sure it can move cleanly, and then another washer. These are just simple M4 washers. Going to poke that through this hole here, and on the back you can see that the bolt sticks through, and then I'm going to put another nylock nut on here as well, and again it's just hand tight for now. I will tighten that up in a minute. And with these, you want them, I mean, you want them to be able to move, you don't want them locked rigidly. Want a little bit of movement. But you see, this is a mechanism now. If I try and pull that ratchet back, it won't move. If I move this lever out of the way, it rotates nicely. So this is what actually locks it in position on each step of the ratchet. Now, the main ratchet arm that pushes it, you can see that's the basic method. That actually just connects to the servo horn. So to mount that one, I'll have to put the servo in position. What we also need are some positions for return springs. So one of which comes through here. This is just an M3 bolt, and that one is too short. So I think, because I need quite a distance on this one, I'm just trying to find in my box of screws the right length. They've all got mixed up. I think that's about right. That's a nice long one, and here it's literally just going to be used to hook a spring over, so it's not moving. I'm just going to put a simple nut on there, not even going to bother with the washers, and again hand tight for now, but I'll tighten it later on. So there's our absolute basics before we put the other servo in position, and that's what we'll do next. Okay, so I've got some more parts out on the bench. Couple of things to fix first though. First one, this arm here with the nut on the back. The other hole in the arm is required for the spring that brings the thing back. So I've got an M3 screw. I think it's 20mm, looks about right. Simple nut on there. That's going to be the thing that basically the spring hooks onto, and then can, you know, move backwards and forwards. So I'm going to put him back in that hole, put his nylock nut back, and then the other obvious one that I thought of is, well, when you put that spring on, it's supposed to connect down here. Well, hang on, there's nothing to connect it to. No, because it's over this side instead, and that's because this one is backwards. So I should have this, and I'm going to reverse the mechanism so that the nut goes this way. This makes a much more compact mechanism doing it this way. I mean, I did look originally at making this one piece. The issue with that is, you know, this piece is very easy to 3D print, lay it flat, it builds the whole thing up layer by layer. You should be able to see it's all hit in one. The same for this bracket here, you know, print it that way. This is all built layer for layer. If I combine the two together into one piece, you've now got a much harder thing to 3D print. You'd have to lay it that way, you'd have to come up, you'd need support for this window here, you'd need support for other various bits, so it was just easier to do it in two pieces. So now that's in position, you can basically see how the return arm over here is going to be connected to a spring connected into this block here. So this is just a straight M3 screw hole. Then I'm going to put a spring in between. Similarly over the other side, I've got two springs on the servo arm, so we need another one of these long screws to come through. Both of these screws, these M3s over here, could probably be shorter, and we will see that once it's actually fixed up together. I'm just going to put the nut on, again hand tight for now, and we'll see how far we've got there. So next thing is the servo. So the servo that does the release mechanism, it doesn't need to be anything fancy. Well, neither of them do really. These are ball bearing servos, FS11 5115M. I think they're about $15. You can buy something equivalent on Amazon for more like 10. To fit them, I'm putting the tail through here, and then I'm going to put the servo in. It's a little bit tight. I might need to file down the hole or wiggle it a little bit to get that in. So I'll make sure that fits in next, and then we're going to secure it with just 4 of these small tiny little 1/2 inch long or self-tapping screws into the plastic, and you see the plastic is nice and thick behind, so it will hold that nice and rigidly. And then I'm also going to put the M3 screw in, and then we're going to look at how we mount the ratchet with the springs to the servo, which is awkward to set up, and helps if you've got access to a servo tester for when you actually get the positions correct. Put the servo in, really just had to put some brute force in there and put a couple of screws in. Tightened up this screw here, added a little return screw here. Now I can show you the first position of the spring. These are a selection of springs that I bought in Amazon, 200-piece spring assortment. They've become quite useful. That is going to go over this M3 screw, which I probably need to take this screw out first, and then hook on there. Doesn't have to be particularly strong, the thing, it just needs to pull it out into basically into position all the time. The main one now we've got to look at is the actual servo mechanism. So this is a metal servo arm. Some are better than others. These are not that great. You can see that it's basically kind of hollow inside. The good ones are solid and heavier. Once you put that onto the servo, then you can rotate that servo through its full range of motions. This one is a 180-degree servo, you just saw there. That's fine. I'm going to leave it roughly in the middle for now. I'm going to put the little screw in the top, which is an M3. This type of servo also has these little side screws to this servo arm to screw in here and here. I'm going to tighten those up tight as well. Now this arm connects to the end of this servo arm and has to have a little bit of gap, and this is actually got an M3 thread built into the arm, probably difficult to see on the camera. So before I put this on, I'm actually going to put this on with a couple of washers, so it's a bit of a wibbly wobbly kind of setup. So here we go, got here's the arm, and let's make sure I'm doing this the right way round. It's got to drive that way to turn the ratchet, so that's good, that's the correct place. I'm going to put 2 washers on just to give it a little bit of distance. Then I am going to basically thread it onto the arm of the servo arm, and it will go all the way through. Hopefully you can see that screwing on nicely, and doesn't need to be super tight. I'm going to leave it slightly slacked off. Then I'm going to put this on here roughly in the center, and then to connect to these 2 screws here, we're going to have 2 springs. One pulls up, one pulls down, which keeps the arm, roughly in the center all the time. For this, you are going to need 2 matched springs. If you don't, then it's obviously going to be offset, which you don't want because you want it in the middle. My collection of springs is all mixed up, so I'm really not sure which ones are a pair or not anymore. I think these are a pair, so I'll use these for this arm, this for the other return one. To make sure it hooks up, I need to put a bolt through the back of this arm, and that will allow both of these springs to hook on. It needs to go all the way through the arm and then stick out a little bit. So I'm going for something like, how long is this one? This is an M3, and I'm pretty sure that's 25mm. So I'm going to put the screw through, tighten this up, hook the springs in position, and then we should have a completed basic sub-assembly for us to play with. Okay, so just putting the last part of this in, which is the springs. Just going to hook them over each position. One high, one low. Probably easy if I do the low one first here. really hoping you can see all of this as it goes on. So what you've effectively got is the arm suspended or held roughly in position more by these two springs. The springs are roughly straight, so there's no sideways forces there. You can see that the thing, if I move this arm out of the way, it sits kind of straight. It's not moving down very much, just a weeny bit maybe. And then the whole mechanism is effectively going to, this one's pinged off, this needs a washer this end. As the servo moves, it moves the arm out, it engages, it pushes the ratchet, which turns the pulley, and it's just going to go step by step by step by step like that. Step, step. And one thing I'm noticing actually is this position of this hole here is arguably a little bit too close to this ratchet point. It really wants to be, more like here, down here. So with that said, I'm actually going to drill an extra hole here, move this screw over to here so that both of the springs have got some tension on. And then this side I'm going to put a washer on so that the spring can't escape over the end of the head of the bolt, which is what actually happened there. And then we are in business. Okay, so put the springs back together, drill this extra hole down in this corner, put a washer this side, and now you can see, I'm going to hold it steady, you can hopefully see there that we've got this arm held with two springs which are now a little bit under tension, and then this one of course as well under tension. You can see that flicks back and forth. So first thing to do before we look at the release mechanism is to just mount this up on a board, use a servo tester just to move the servo, and as we do that we'll be able to record the angles that we need to basically make the ratchet move on its own. So next phase is to bolt it down to a bit of board. Here's one I prepared earlier. Just a random off-cut shelf. This is not ideal. This is a piece of, well, in the UK we call it chipboard. Here they call it particle board. It's kind of crappiest quality wood you can get, really. It absorbs moisture horribly. It goes bloaty. It delaminates. I wouldn't recommend it. However, I'm putting it down because it's literally all I could find at short notice. I'm going to be mounting this down, roughly in the middle, so that once this thing is in position, we can do things with it. And then we're going to put our vertical cage of pipes next to it, so that we can put the string in on the pulley. In case you're wondering how does it attach to the pulley, if I just try and zoom in just a wee bit and rotate it on the ratchet, you'll see there's a tiny little hole in the pulley. That's designed for an M3 screw. So the idea is you put your cable down, your string, put your M3 in, and it actually basically uses it as almost like a filler. So it stretches into all the nooks and crannies of the actual thread, and it's surprisingly strong. I use this like 400-pound fishing line black stuff. I'll provide a link to it. So we're going to bolt that down, and then we are actually at a point where we can hook the servo tester up to test it. Okay, so I've got my assembly bolted down to the board, just 4 screws holding it down, and I've got it hooked up to my little homemade servo tester. You can obviously just buy one of these things, powered by a 12-volt battery pack. What you've effectively got here is a tiny weeny little screen that tells me the angle, servo angle, 100 degrees. And by moving this little knob I can change the angle. She still says it says 115 now, 120, and you can see the effect on the servo arm. So what you're aiming for is when the thing is pulled back, it's kind of not touching any teeth. So that's quite a good position. So note down the angle there of, I think that says 85. And then you want it to engage the teeth and push it until it clicks, and then when it's clicked it means it's ratcheted up 1 notch. And you see the recording is 130. So if you move it between 85 degrees and 130 degrees over and over again, what you effectively get is this type of motion. Now I'm doing this manually just with the servo position, but you can see the effect. It is turning the thing up. Now imagine you've got a string on that ratchet and you've now created some motion. So next thing to do is to mount the put the string on, mount the big pop-up piece on the top, and then look at the release mechanism. The release mechanism simply moves this lever out of the way, and once the thing's under tension and this is moved out of the way as well, then the spring will pull the thing up. It's getting quite big and unwieldy now, difficult to photograph, so try and bear with me. This is the type of string I was talking about earlier. It is 𝗬𝗏𝗖 extreme-build 100 meters, 300 pounds, 1 millimeter. Basically just very strong string. What I'm going to need to do here in my pole, you should see me pulling down, is basically drill a hole in it so that I can put a screw through, a bolt through. Then I'm going to basically just loop this around the thing, also put a piece in the put the other end inside the pulley, and then link them together. Now the length of the string is basically going to be dictated by where this is at its rest position versus where you want it to end up. So for example, if I think the string's in there and I pull it up, you know, it's going to be up to somewhere around this kind of height. That's going to pull the thing almost down to the bottom once it's looped over the screw. That's what we're going to aim to do, and then we can actually see the mechanism in exercise just using the servo tester. No need for Arduinos yet. So I'm going to cut a piece of string that length, screw in the pulley, screw through here, and see what it looks like. So we've got the screw now with the string in the pulley. That was quite difficult to do. If I were you, I would do the string before you put the whole thing together. Quite difficult. And I've also got a hole here, you should be able to see, with the screw coming through, and the two of them together. So what I can now show you with my servo tester and my manual ratcheting is I should be able to make the string go down. So focus on this guy, see that he's actually going down. And what I'm going to do, actually move the camera so that you can hopefully see it ratchet as we go. So I'm pulling the lever back. You can see inch by inch the string is getting wound onto the ratchet, onto the pulley, and that's all there is to it, really. I mean, the key is to get your positions of the servo right. Now if you wanted to, you could now go straight from this to using, you know, one of the peekaboo controllers for servos, or you can get a great little board from Polulu that allows you to do functions with servos as well, so you can get it to repetitively move backwards and forwards. But of course, because I want to do it all myself and have complete control, and I want audio and I want sounds with you know, sound effects, I want lights and other stuff, then I'm going to do it in my little prop controller board with an Arduino. And I'm going to go through the code once we've looked at the hardware. You can see this is, you know, making quite a decent job of bringing this back. And I can go further, but for the interest of time, let's see what happens you know, if I zoom out here to the overall thing, here I need to see. Now if I put my finger on this little lever, it releases here, but look what happens, it's still lodged by the actual arm. So what you actually have to do is unconnect the arm like that. You can see I've moved it out the way, and now when you press it, boom, up it shoots, because you've got nothing left on the ratchet, and then all it can do is go up with the springs. Okay, so the last thing to do to put down on here before we start looking at all the funky electronics that go with it is the release servo. So we're going to need a servo bracket, servo which is going to get in the top. Going to put a couple of screws in just to hold the thing in place, and then an arm to actually do the motoring of the thing, the movement. And then all we're going to do is make sure that arm is in roughly this position where it's not actually touching it, and then when it wants to, it will rotate that way, push the arm up just far enough for it to release. So I'm just going to bolt that together, put an arm on there, and show you what that looks like. So the servo's bolted down. I've put one of the standard plastic heads on it. I've connected my servo tester to it, and you can see that as I rotate it, it can move the lever out of the way. Might need to actually use a bit of a longer servo arm here. You just want to basically disconnect the pawl from the ratchet cleanly. You don't want any sort of hanging behind. It's difficult to get the thing that close to the servo because of the two bases, but you can get it a bit closer than that. So last thing to add before we look at the electronics is adding a final limit switch. The limit switch is required so that when the pipe comes down to the bottom, it actually tells the electronics that it's at the bottom. So what we've got is a simple micro switch, very standard. You want to be wiring to the common and normally open terminals. And all I'm doing with this in this version, I'm just slotting it in here, this little 3D printed mount, and then I've got a couple of screws to go in just to hold it down to my wooden board, and that will actually be stiff enough to keep the thing in. I'll just show you the one. Listen carefully. There we go. Hits the switch and off it goes. Now, if you don't really want to pull it this far down, then you can put the switch higher up, or even, you know, put it on some sort of adjustable block if you wanted to. In the next video in the series, we're going to talk about the electronics that go into the device to see how the servos work and how we can set that up. If you like this video, please like and subscribe, and go to the next video in the series to find out more about how this unique prop mechanism works.